I'm Mason Andrews, 32 years old and a senior software developer with a life I worked hard to build. Growing up, my sister Rachel and I were inseparable, which is why I never hesitated to lend her my apartment during my business trip to Japan. What I never expected was coming home to discover she'd been using not just my place, but my entire identity to impress a string of boyfriends. The ultimate betrayal? Finding $3,000 missing from my account and facing her tearful lies in court. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you've ever been betrayed by family, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, the judge's reaction in this story is worth sticking around for. Rachel and I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Cincinnati. Just 3 years apart, we developed the kind of sibling bond that most parents dream of. I still remember how she'd follow me around the neighborhood on her little pink bicycle, determined to keep up with her big brother and his friends. We shared everything from toys to secrets, and I always felt this innate responsibility to protect her from any harm that came her way. Our childhood wasn't always smooth sailing. When we were teenagers, our parents went through a bitter divorce that shook the foundation of our family. I was 16 and Rachel was 13 when the fighting became unbearable. Night after night, we'd huddle together in my room, the music turned up loud enough to drown out the shouting downstairs. Sometimes I'd make up adventure stories to distract her, tales about siblings who could overcome any obstacle together. During those turbulent years, we formed an unbreakable alliance, or at least that's what I thought at the time. When our parents finally separated, Dad moved across the country for a fresh start, while Mom threw herself into work to cope with the emotional fallout. This left Rachel and me essentially raising ourselves through our formative years. I started working part-time jobs after school to help with expenses, often sharing my earnings with Rachel for her school supplies or clothes that Mom was too busy to notice she needed. After high school, I earned a scholarship to study computer science at the University of Michigan. Those 4 years were transformative. I discovered my passion for software development and excelled in my classes, graduating with honors and immediately landing a job at a tech startup in Boston. The hours were long and the pay wasn't great, but I was building experience and connections that would prove invaluable. Meanwhile, Rachel took a different path. She started college but dropped out after 3 semesters, citing that it wasn't for her. She bounced between retail jobs and brief stints at community college, never quite finding her footing. Her relationship history followed a similar pattern, a series of intense romances that burned bright and fizzled quickly. Despite the distance, I remained her constant supporter, offering both emotional and occasionally financial support whenever she needed it. My career trajectory continued upward. After 2 years at the startup, I was recruited by a larger tech company with a substantial salary increase. By 30, I had been promoted to senior developer, leading a team on high-profile projects. My financial stability allowed me to purchase a beautiful apartment in downtown Boston, a modern 2-bedroom space with floor-to-ceiling windows, contemporary furnishings, and a stunning view of the city skyline. It was my pride and joy, the physical manifestation of all my hard work. The apartment wasn't just functional, it was a statement. The open-concept kitchen featured marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The living room showcased a custom entertainment system and original artwork I'd carefully selected. My home office was equipped with dual ultra-wide monitors and a standing desk that had been featured in a design magazine. It was, without question, the kind of place that would impress anyone who walked through the door. Last spring, Rachel called me in tears. Her latest boyfriend had broken up with her and simultaneously kicked her out of their shared apartment. She had nowhere to go and was desperate. "Mason, I swear this is the last time I'll ask for help," she sobbed over the phone. "I just need to get back on my feet." As luck would have it, my company had just offered me an incredible opportunity, leading a collaboration with our Japanese partners, requiring a 3-week trip to Tokyo. The timing seemed perfect, and without hesitation, I offered Rachel my apartment while I was away. "You can stay at my place until you find something else," I told her. "I'll be gone for 3 weeks, and you know my place is big enough. It'll give you time to sort things out." The relief in her voice was palpable. "You're literally saving my life, Mason. I don't know what I'd do without you." The day before my flight, Rachel arrived with 2 suitcases and an excessive amount of gratitude. I gave her the grand tour, showing her how to use the smart home features and pointing out my collection of rare vinyl records that she should be careful around. "Here's the spare key and the security code," I said, handing her a small envelope. "Just remember, the building has strict noise policies after 10, and my neighbor Mrs. Johnson is particularly sensitive about it." Rachel nodded eagerly, taking notes on her phone. "Don't worry about a thing. I'll treat this place better than my own." I also showed her where I kept emergency cash, about $500 hidden in a book on my shelf. "Only for real emergencies," I emphasized, and she nodded solemnly. Before leaving for the airport, I stocked the refrigerator with groceries and left a list of local restaurants and delivery services. I even arranged for my cleaning service to come once during my absence, giving Rachel a heads up about the scheduled date. "I can't thank you enough for this," Rachel said, hugging me tightly as I headed out the door. "You've always been the best brother anyone could ask for." I left for Japan feeling good about helping my sister and completely confident that my apartment was in trustworthy hands. After all, despite her flaws, Rachel had never given me a reason to doubt her integrity. This was just another instance of me being there for her when she needed it most, continuing the supportive relationship we built over decades. I had no idea that this act of kindness would lead to one of the most painful betrayals of my life. Tokyo was everything I had hoped for and more. The vibrant city, the dedicated work ethic of our Japanese counterparts, and the fascinating cultural experiences kept me thoroughly engaged. Our collaboration project was going exceptionally well, with both teams making significant progress on the development of our new software platform. I was so immersed in the experience that I barely had time to think about home. That changed about a week into my trip when my phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Johnson, my 60-something neighbor who I'd always maintained a friendly relationship with. "Mason, I don't mean to be a bother, but there was quite a lot of noise coming from your apartment last night. Music and laughter until nearly 2 in the morning. I thought you were away on business?" I immediately called Rachel, concerned about what might be happening in my absence. "Oh, it was just a small get-together with a couple of friends," Rachel explained casually. "We must have lost track of time. I'm really sorry if we disturbed anyone. It won't happen again." Her explanation seemed reasonable enough. After all, Rachel was sociable by nature, and I couldn't expect her to stay cooped up alone for 3 weeks. I texted Mrs. Johnson an apology, and thought nothing more of it. 3 days later, I received an email from Harold Thompson, the building manager. "Mr. Andrews, we've noticed an unusual amount of visitor activity to your unit over the past week. As per building policy, residents hosting multiple guests for extended periods should notify management. Please remember that our security protocols are in place for everyone's safety." This was more concerning. I called Rachel immediately, catching her as she was apparently heading out. "Multiple visitors? Rachel, what's going on?" "Don't be so uptight, Mason," she replied, the background noise suggesting she was indeed on the move. "I've just had a few friends over to keep me company." The building manager is exaggerating. You know how these fancy places can be with their rules. I wasn't entirely satisfied with her answer but decided not to press the issue. Rachel had always had an active social life, and I reminded myself that she was going through a difficult time after her breakup. Perhaps surrounding herself with friends was her way of coping. My concern grew when I started receiving notifications from my credit card company about unusual spending patterns. There were charges from upscale restaurants in Boston that I obviously hadn't visited, a wine bar I'd never heard of, and even a high-end clothing store. Each charge ranged from $100 to $300, quickly adding up to a substantial amount. Again I called Rachel, this time with a more serious tone. "There are charges on my credit card that I didn't make. Do you know anything about this?" There was a pause before she answered. "I'm so sorry, Mason. I had an emergency and used your card that you left in the drawer. My car needed unexpected repairs, and I had a doctor's appointment I couldn't miss. I was going to tell you and pay you back as soon as you got home. I took a deep breath, trying to manage my growing frustration. Rachel, you should have asked me first. That's a lot of money, and some of these charges don't sound like car repairs or medical bills. I had to use Uber to get around while my car was in the shop. She quickly added. And I had to buy some medication and special food for the diet my doctor recommended. Look, I promise I'll explain everything when you get back. I've been keeping track of every penny. Despite my misgivings, I chose to believe her. Rachel was my sister, after all, and we'd always been there for each other. I reminded her to be more careful with my credit card and focused my attention back on the project in Tokyo, which was entering a critical phase. As my trip neared its end, I found myself increasingly eager to return to the comfort of my own home. The night before my return flight, I texted Rachel to confirm my arrival time, thinking she might want to welcome me back. Her response was surprisingly brief. Great! Actually, I found a place to stay with a friend. I'll be gone before you get back. Thanks for everything. Something about her message felt off, but I was too exhausted from the intensive work schedule and looming jet lag to analyze it further. At least I would have my space back to myself, I thought. The 18-hour journey back to Boston was grueling. By the time my taxi pulled up to my building, all I wanted was a hot shower and my own bed. As I inserted my key into the lock and pushed open the door, I was immediately hit with the unmistakable odor of stale alcohol and perfume. Standing in the entryway, I surveyed my apartment in shock. Empty wine bottles and food containers littered the kitchen counters. There were mysterious stains on my designer sofa, and a cracked wine glass lay forgotten under the coffee table. The throw pillows were scattered across the floor, and someone had spilled what looked like red wine on my white area rug. Moving through the apartment in disbelief, I found even more disturbing evidence of what had been happening in my absence. In the guest bathroom, there were multiple toothbrushes and men's grooming products. On the bedside table in the guest room, I found a watch that definitely wasn't mine and receipts from restaurants and clubs I'd never visited. The final blow came when I entered my bedroom. My bed sheets were rumpled and unwashed, and there was an unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. In my closet, I found clothing items that weren't mine, a men's dress shirt, a tie, and even a pair of size 11 dress shoes when I wore a size 9. With mounting dread, I checked my emergency cash stash, only to find the book hollow and empty, the $500 gone without a note. Opening my laptop, I logged into my banking app to discover numerous additional charges I hadn't authorized, bringing the total to just over $3,000. My sanctuary had been violated, my trust shattered, and my sister was nowhere to be found. As I sat on the edge of my disheveled bed, I realized this wasn't a simple case of Rachel being careless or having a few friends over. Something much more deliberate and deceitful had taken place in my home, and I was determined to uncover exactly what it was. I spent the next hour calling Rachel repeatedly, each call going straight to voicemail. My messages grew increasingly urgent and angry. Rachel, call me back immediately. We need to talk about what happened at my apartment. I know you used my credit card. I need an explanation now. This is serious, Rachel. There's men's clothing here. What the hell has been going on? After the 10th unanswered call, I realized I needed to approach this differently. If Rachel wasn't going to provide answers, I would have to find them myself. My first stop was the lobby security desk. Frank, the daytime security guard who had worked in our building for years, greeted me with obvious discomfort. Mr. Andrews, welcome back. How was your trip? Not as good as my sister's time in my apartment, apparently, I replied dryly. Frank, I need to know what was happening while I was gone. Frank shifted uncomfortably. Your sister had quite a few visitors, sir. Mostly in the evenings. Different gentlemen, from what I observed. Different gentlemen? How many are we talking about? At least 3 different men that I noticed, sir. They would come regularly, sometimes staying overnight. This was worse than I'd imagined. Is there security footage of the lobby during this time? Frank nodded and led me to a small room behind the security desk where the building's camera feeds were monitored. After getting permission from Harold Thompson, who was equally concerned about the situation, Frank showed me footage from the past 3 weeks. The videos confirmed my worst fears. Over the course of my absence, Rachel had brought at least 3 different men to my apartment. Each would arrive carrying expensive wine or gifts, dressed as if for a special date. The timestamps showed they often stayed until the following morning. Even more disturbing was Rachel's appearance and behavior in these videos. She was dressed in clothes I'd never seen before, likely purchased with my credit card, and carried herself with an air of affluence that wasn't genuine. In one clip, I could clearly see her pointing out features of the lobby to one of the men, speaking animatedly as if she owned the place. Next, I approached my neighbor Mrs. Johnson, hoping she might have overheard something useful. "I didn't want to cause trouble," she began hesitantly. "But since you're asking directly, your sister was quite the hostess while you were away." "What do you mean, exactly?" "Well, she would introduce herself as Rachel Andrews, sister of Mason Andrews, the senior software developer who designed systems for major financial institutions. She made quite a point of mentioning your career accomplishments." My stomach churned. "Did she say anything else about me?" Mrs. Johnson nodded. "She told one young man that you had advised several Silicon Valley startups and that you let her use your apartment whenever she wanted because you had multiple properties. She even claimed that you had offered to help her open her own business." None of this was true. While I was successful in my career, I had never worked with Silicon Valley startups. I certainly didn't own multiple properties, and Rachel and I had never discussed me funding a business for her. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and began searching social media. Rachel's Instagram account revealed dozens of photos taken in my apartment over the past 3 weeks. In one, she was lounging on my balcony with a glass of expensive whiskey from my personal collection. The caption read, "Enjoying the high life at my brother's downtown penthouse. #blessed #luxury lifestyle." My apartment wasn't a penthouse. In another photo, she posed in my kitchen pretending to cook an elaborate meal, wearing an apron over a cocktail dress. "Preparing a gourmet dinner for a special someone in my brother's designer kitchen. He taught me everything I know about fine dining." I had never taught Rachel anything about cooking or fine dining. The comments on these posts were equally disturbing. Men I didn't recognize wrote things like, "Thanks for the amazing evening. Your brother's art collection is impressive. Can't believe we got to watch the game on that incredible home theater system. Your brother must be doing very well. Dinner was exceptional. Please thank your brother for the vintage wine recommendation." I had never recommended wine to anyone through Rachel. The deception went even deeper. With growing horror, I discovered that Rachel had created dating app profiles where she described herself as a successful entrepreneur temporarily staying at my brother's luxury apartment while my own condo is being renovated. She had used these apps to meet men who were clearly attracted to her apparent wealthy lifestyle. Most shockingly, I found emails in my rarely used personal account that Rachel must have accessed. She had corresponded with several men using my email address, signing as Rachel using Mason's computer, creating the impression that I was not only aware of her activities but supportive of them. In one email, she wrote to someone named Ethan, "My brother Mason says he'd be happy to meet you for drinks when he returns from his international business trip. He's always looking to connect with other successful professionals in the city." I had never offered to meet any of Rachel's boyfriends for drinks, and the casual way she volunteered my time and personal connections made my blood boil. The final piece of evidence came when I checked my credit card statements in detail. The charges weren't just for restaurants and shopping as I'd initially thought. There were also expenses for a wine tasting class, a private harbor cruise, and even a helicopter tour of the city, all experiences Rachel had apparently enjoyed with her rotating cast of suitors. Most damning of all were the signatures on the digital receipts. Rachel hadn't just used my credit card, she had forged my signature, a clear case of identity theft. By now, my initial shock had given way to a deep sense of betrayal and rage. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a case of Rachel taking a few liberties with my apartment. This was a calculated scheme to use my home, my identity, and my financial resources to create a false impression of wealth and status to attract men. I called my friend Brandon, one of the few people I felt I could trust completely, and explained the situation. "This is criminal, Mason," he said after listening to my account. "Identity theft, credit card fraud, forgery. You need to take legal action." "She's my sister," I protested weakly, the familial bond still pulling at me despite everything. "Would a sister do this to you?" Brandon countered. "Mason, if you don't hold her accountable, she'll never stop. This kind of behavior escalates. Today it's $3,000. What will it be next time?" Deep down, I knew he was right. The sister I thought I knew would never have betrayed me like this. The evidence was overwhelming, and the person who had done these things was a stranger to me. With a heavy heart but strengthened resolve, I decided to confront Rachel and demand repayment. If she refused, I would have no choice but to pursue legal action, no matter how painful that might be. After nearly a week of Rachel dodging my calls and texts, I finally tracked her down at our mother's house in the suburbs. I hadn't told our mother about the situation yet, preferring to give Rachel a chance to explain herself first. Part of me still hoped there was some explanation that could make sense of her actions, some misunderstanding that could preserve the relationship I had valued all my life. When I arrived, Rachel greeted me with a casual hug as if nothing had happened. "Mason! I didn't know you were coming over today. How was Japan? Did you bring me anything?" Her nonchalance in the face of what she'd done was infuriating, but I maintained my composure as we moved into the living room. Our mother was out running errands, giving us the privacy we needed for this conversation. "Rachel, we need to talk about what happened at my apartment while I was away," I said, my voice deliberately calm. She waved a hand dismissively. "I know it was a little messy when you got back." I meant to clean up more thoroughly, but my friend Jasmine needed help moving suddenly, and I had to rush out. "This isn't about the mess, Rachel. This is about you bringing multiple men to my apartment, pretending it was yours, and stealing $3,000 from me." Her expression flickered briefly before settling into indignant denial. "What are you talking about? I had a few friends over, yes, but multiple men? You're making it sound so sordid." I pulled out my phone and showed her the security footage from the lobby. 3 different men in 3 weeks, Rachel. All of them staying overnight. She crossed her arms defensively. "So I dated while staying at your place. That's hardly a crime. You never said I couldn't have guests." "Guests? You told them the apartment was yours. You bragged about my career and implied that I was funding your lifestyle." "I didn't say any of that," she insisted, but her eyes darted away from mine. I scrolled through the Instagram posts I'd discovered. "Then how do you explain these? You called my apartment a downtown penthouse. You claimed I taught you about fine dining and wine pairing." Rachel's face flushed. "It's just social media, Mason. Everyone exaggerates. It's not a big deal." "And this?" I showed her the email she'd sent from my account. "You used my personal email to correspond with these men. You offered to introduce them to me without my knowledge or consent." For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words, but quickly recovered. "I was just being friendly. I thought you'd want to meet the people in my life." "Rachel, stop lying. I know about the credit card charges too. $3,000 on restaurants, clothes, and experiences to impress these men." At this, her demeanor changed. The fake innocence gave way to defensiveness. "Okay, fine. I used your card for a few things. But I was going to pay you back. You know I'm good for it." "A few things?" "There were dozens of charges. And you forged my signature on the receipts. That's identity theft and fraud." Rachel stood up, her voice rising. "Why are you being so dramatic? This is what family does, Mason. We help each other out. How many times did you borrow Mom and Dad's car in high school? How many times did I cover for you when you broke curfew? I couldn't believe she was comparing teenage infractions to stealing thousands of dollars. This isn't about borrowing a car, Rachel. This is about you systematically lying and stealing from me while I was out of the country. You have plenty of money. She shot back, her tone turning bitter. You live in that fancy apartment with your fancy job while I'm struggling to make rent. Is $3,000 really going to break the bank for you? Her entitled attitude stunned me. So you think it's okay to steal from me because I've worked hard for what I have? Worked hard? She scoffed. You got lucky. You've always been the golden child, the one who got the scholarships and the great job offers. Everything's always come easily to you. This revisionist history of our lives was the final straw. Nothing was handed to me, Rachel. I worked multiple jobs through college. I put in 80-hour weeks at the startup. I earned everything I have. Well, you could share more of it with your family instead of being so selfish. She countered. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Rachel, I need you to pay back the $3,000 you stole from me. All of it. Her face hardened. I don't have that kind of money right now. Then we can work out a payment plan. But I need your commitment that you'll pay it back in full. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Actually, if you think about it, you owe me. Excuse me? All those times I supported you emotionally through college and your early career. All those late-night phone calls when you were stressed about work. That kind of support isn't free, Mason. I'd say we're even. I was speechless. Rachel had completely rewritten our history together, casting herself as my supporter when in reality, the dynamic had always been the reverse. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Our mother walked in, shopping bags in hand, surprised to see us both. Mason. What a nice surprise. I didn't know you were visiting today. Before I could respond, Rachel burst into tears. Mom, Mason is threatening to sue me over a tiny misunderstanding. He's being so cruel. Mom immediately rushed to Rachel's side, putting an arm around her shoulders. What's going on? For the next 20 minutes, Rachel spun a tale of victimhood, claiming I had given her permission to use my credit card and was now vindicatively demanding repayment because I was jealous of her happiness with a new boyfriend. She painted herself as the struggling younger sibling being bullied by her financially secure brother who had more than enough money to spare. To my dismay, Mom seemed to be buying it. Mason, surely you can help your sister out during a rough patch? Family supports each other. Mom, she stole from me. She forged my signature. She brought strangers into my home and pretended it was hers. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, Mom said soothingly. Rachel wouldn't do those things. Rachel looked at me with tear-stained but triumphant eyes, knowing she had successfully manipulated our mother. I stood up, gathering my things. This isn't a misunderstanding. I have evidence of everything. And I'm not going to be gaslit by my own family. Rachel, you have 1 week to start making arrangements to pay me back, or I'm taking legal action. You would sue your own sister? Mom gasped, clutching Rachel closer. Apparently my own sister would steal from me and lie about it, so yes, I would. As I walked out the door, I heard Rachel's sobs grow louder, a performance designed to further cement her position as the victim. The realization that I couldn't trust my own family was devastating, but it also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to be manipulated and taken advantage of, even by blood relatives. The next day, I called Gregory Hayes, a lawyer recommended by Brandon, and scheduled a consultation. If Rachel thought I was bluffing about legal action, she was about to learn otherwise. Gregory Hayes's office was in a converted brownstone in the financial district, the interior a tasteful blend of traditional architecture and modern furnishings. The lawyer himself was a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and sharp, observant eyes behind fashionable glasses. He listened attentively as I laid out the entire situation, occasionally taking notes, but mostly just absorbing the details. First of all, he said when I had finished. "I want to acknowledge how difficult this must be for you. Taking legal action against a family member is never easy." I nodded, appreciating his understanding. "Based on what you've told me," he continued, "we're looking at several potential charges: identity theft, credit card fraud, forgery, and possibly conversion, which is the legal term for using someone else's property as your own." "What's the process like?" I asked. "I've never been involved in anything legal before." Gregory outlined the steps: filing a police report, submitting documentation of the fraud, potentially having a warrant issued for Rachel's arrest, and ultimately going to court if she contested the charges. "Most cases like this settle before trial," he explained. "Once the evidence is presented, defendants usually prefer to negotiate rather than face a judge." The thought of Rachel being arrested made my stomach clench, but I reminded myself of her complete lack of remorse and her attempt to manipulate our mother against me. She had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. That afternoon, I went to the police station to file a report. I brought printouts of the credit card statements, copies of the forged signatures, screenshots of Rachel's social media posts, and a USB drive containing the security footage from my building. The officer taking the report raised his eyebrows at the thoroughness of my evidence. "You've certainly done your homework, sir." Most victims of identity theft don't have nearly this much documentation. "I never expected to need it," I replied. "Especially not against my own sister." 2 days later, I received a call from Gregory informing me that the police had contacted Rachel about the report. "She's claiming you gave her verbal permission to use your credit card and stay in your apartment," he told me. "She says there was an understanding between you that she could entertain friends there, and that you had offered to help her financially during a difficult time." "That's completely false," I said. "I gave her permission to stay at my apartment, yes, but nothing about using my credit card or pretending the place was hers." "I expected as much," Gregory replied. "Her statement is full of vague claims that would be difficult to prove. Our evidence, on the other hand, is concrete and substantial." A court date was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I focused on preparing for the case while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in my work and personal life. It wasn't easy. The stress of the upcoming legal battle affected my sleep and concentration, and I found myself constantly distracted by thoughts of the confrontation to come. Brandon proved to be an invaluable support during this time, listening to my concerns and offering practical advice. "You're doing the right thing," he assured me repeatedly. "This isn't just about the money. It's about not letting someone take advantage of you, even if that someone is family." Not everyone in my life was as supportive. Word of the situation had spread through our extended family and mutual friends, with Rachel apparently working overtime to present her version of events. I received uncomfortable calls from relatives asking why I couldn't work things out privately, and suggesting I was being too harsh on my struggling sister. A childhood friend named Tyler called to tell me that Rachel had been in tears at a mutual friend's gathering, claiming I was persecuting her out of jealousy over her new relationship. "She said you offered to help her financially but then changed your mind when you saw how happy she was with her new boyfriend," Tyler reported. "She's really upset, man." I was stunned by the elaborate fiction Rachel had created. "None of that is true, Tyler. She stole my credit card and forged my signature. I have the evidence." "Well, there are always two sides to every story," he replied noncommittally, making it clear he wasn't convinced. The social isolation was painful, but it also clarified who my true friends were. Brandon and a handful of others stood firmly by me, while fair-weather friends drifted toward Rachel's more dramatic narrative. The night before the court date, Gregory and I met for a final review of our case. He seemed confident in our position. "The evidence is overwhelming," he assured me. "The security footage, the credit card statements, the forged signatures, the social media posts, the emails from your account, even the testimony from your neighbor and building security. Rachel's defense amounts to she said, but the documented evidence tells a clear story." As I drove home from that meeting, I found myself reflecting on the relationship Rachel and I had once shared. The little girl on the pink bicycle had grown into someone I no longer recognized, someone capable of betrayal and manipulation without apparent remorse. It was a loss I was still struggling to process, a grief that existed alongside my determination to see justice done. That night, I barely slept, rehearsing in my mind what I would say when face to face with Rachel in court. Part of me still hoped for a last-minute recognition of wrongdoing on her part, an acknowledgement of the harm she had caused, and a genuine apology. But the more realistic part of me knew that tomorrow would likely bring more denials and accusations, more attempts to paint herself as the victim. Whatever happened, I was resolved to stand my ground. This was no longer just about the $3,000. It was about truth, accountability, and self-respect. I would not allow Rachel's tears or manipulation to deter me from seeking the justice I deserved. The county courthouse was an imposing structure of granite and marble, its classical columns and broad steps projecting an air of solemnity and authority. I arrived an hour early, dressed in a conservative navy suit and tie, my evidence organized in a leather portfolio that Gregory had provided. In the corridor outside the courtroom, I spotted Rachel and her lawyer, a young woman in a charcoal pantsuit who looked barely out of law school. Rachel herself was nearly unrecognizable from the sister I knew. Gone were the trendy clothes and bold makeup she typically favored. Instead, she wore a modest beige dress with a cardigan, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and minimal makeup that emphasized her vulnerability rather than her usual confidence. It was a calculated image, designed to present her as innocent and victimized. When she saw me, she quickly looked away, leaning toward her lawyer and whispering something that made the young woman frown in my direction. The performance had already begun. At exactly 9:30, we were called into the courtroom. Judge Margaret Sullivan, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, presided from the bench. Her reputation for no-nonsense efficiency was immediately apparent as she called the court to order and established the parameters for the day's proceedings. "This is case number 47291, Andrews vs. Andrews," she announced. "A civil complaint alleging identity theft, credit card fraud, and conversion. We'll hear opening statements, examine the evidence, and take testimony from both parties." Gregory presented our case first, laying out the timeline of events and the nature of Rachel's deception with methodical precision. He outlined how she had not only used my credit card without permission but had created an elaborate fiction around my identity and property to impress a series of men. "Your Honor, this was not a simple misunderstanding between siblings," Gregory concluded. "The evidence will show a pattern of deliberate deception and financial exploitation that Mr. Andrews discovered only upon returning from his business trip abroad." Rachel's lawyer, who introduced herself as Amanda Collins, presented a starkly different narrative in her opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is indeed about a misunderstanding, but not the kind Mr. Andrews's counsel suggests. This is about a brother who offered financial assistance to his sister during a difficult transition period, then vindicatively withdrew that support and twisted the narrative when he returned from his trip. Ms. Andrews had every reason to believe she had permission to use her brother's credit card for reasonable expenses while staying at his apartment, an arrangement they had established through their long-standing supportive sibling relationship. I struggled to maintain my composure as I listened to this complete fabrication of our history and the events in question. When I took the stand to testify, Gregory guided me through a detailed account of the facts: my agreement to let Rachel stay at my apartment, the discovery of the unauthorized credit card charges, the evidence of multiple men being brought to my home, and Rachel's use of my identity to create a false impression of wealth and success. I described finding men's clothing items in my apartment and the damage to my property. I detailed the social media posts where Rachel had misrepresented my apartment as her own and falsely claimed connections to my professional accomplishments. I explained how she had accessed my personal email to correspond with men she was dating, making commitments on my behalf without my knowledge. Throughout my testimony, Rachel stared down at the table, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the picture of wrongful accusation. During cross-examination, Amanda Collins attempted to paint me as controlling and vindictive. Mr. Andrews, isn't it true that you've always been the successful sibling, while your sister has struggled financially? I've worked hard for my success, I replied evenly. And I've helped Rachel numerous times over the years. So you admit to providing financial assistance to your sister in the past? How is this situation different? In the past, I gave her money directly when she asked for help. I never authorized her to take my credit card, forge my signature, or pretend my property and accomplishments were hers. Collins pressed on. Isn't it possible that in your conversations before your trip, you gave her the impression that she could use your credit card for necessary expenses? No. I specifically showed her where I kept emergency cash for necessities. There was no discussion of her using my credit card. And yet you left it accessible in your apartment? It was in a locked drawer in my desk. She would have had to search for it deliberately. When Rachel took the stand, she presented a radically different version of events, her voice soft and occasionally breaking with emotion. Mason has always been generous with me, she began, casting me occasional wounded glances. When I was going through my breakup, he offered me not just his apartment but told me to consider everything there yours while I'm gone. He knew I was in a difficult financial situation and told me to use his credit card if I needed to. This was a complete fabrication, but Rachel delivered it with such seeming sincerity that I saw Judge Sullivan watching her intently. As for the men who visited, Rachel continued, Mason knew I was dating. We discussed it before he left. He said having company would be good for me while I was recovering from my breakup. Gregory's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. He presented the credit card statements, highlighting charges for helicopter tours, wine tastings, and designer clothing. Mess. Andrews, are you suggesting that these expenses constituted necessities during your stay? Rachel squirmed slightly. Mason has always wanted me to enjoy the finer things in life. He understands that maintaining certain appearances is important in Boston social circles. And these social media posts where you claim the apartment is yours and that your brother taught you about fine dining, were these also part of your understanding with Mr. Andrews? I was just being playful on social media. Everyone exaggerates a little online. Gregory displayed the emails sent from my account. Did Mr. Andrews also give you permission to access his personal email and make commitments on his behalf to men you were dating? For the first time, Rachel seemed truly uncomfortable. I needed to check something in his email, and I saw messages from these men. I was just being friendly by responding. Without your brother's knowledge or consent, I didn't think he would mind. The most damning evidence came when Gregory presented the forged signatures on the credit card receipts, displaying them side by side with samples of my authentic signature and Rachel's handwriting. Ms. Andrews, did you sign your brother's name on these receipts? Rachel hesitated, then responded. I signed as I thought he would want me to. That's not what I asked? Did you forge your brother's signature on these credit card receipts? After a long pause, Rachel admitted. Yes, but only because I knew he would have approved the purchases if he were there. Just when I thought we had presented all our evidence, Gregory announced, Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness, Ethan Parker. Rachel's head snapped up, her expression changing from practiced vulnerability to genuine alarm. A young man in his early 30s entered the courtroom. I recognized him from the security footage as one of the men Rachel had brought to my apartment. Ethan testified that Rachel had explicitly told him the apartment was hers, that her wealthy brother was currently traveling internationally, and that she had access to his credit card, because he believes in supporting family. He recounted how Rachel had boasted about connections in the tech industry that she could facilitate through me, and how she had promised to introduce him to venture capitalists I supposedly knew. When did you discover these claims were false? Gregory asked. When Detective Wilson contacted me about the fraud investigation, Ethan replied. I was shocked to learn that Rachel didn't own the apartment and had no authority to use her brother's credit card. Rachel's composure finally cracked. He's lying! She burst out, her voice no longer soft and vulnerable but sharp with anger. "Ethan is just upset because I broke up with him. Ms. Andrews, control yourself," Judge Sullivan warned sternly. "You'll have an opportunity to respond through your counsel." Rachel's outburst seemed to confirm everything we had presented about her true character. Her carefully constructed facade of innocence had slipped, revealing the manipulative person beneath. After all testimony concluded, Judge Sullivan called for a brief recess to review the evidence before delivering her verdict. As we waited in the hallway, I caught Rachel glaring at me with undisguised hostility, all pretense of victimhood abandoned now that the judge wasn't watching. In that moment, I realized that regardless of the legal outcome, our relationship as siblings was irreparably damaged. The person staring at me with such venom was not the sister I had grown up with and protected. That person, if she had ever truly existed, was gone. When court resumed, Judge Sullivan's expression was grave as she delivered her verdict. "Having reviewed all the evidence presented today, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Mason Andrews. The evidence of identity theft, credit card fraud, and conversion is substantial and compelling." Rachel's face strained of color as the judge continued. "Ms. Andrews, the court orders you to repay the full amount of $3,000 to your brother, plus court costs and reasonable legal fees. A payment plan will be established based on your current financial situation, but the debt must be paid in full." Judge Sullivan removed her glasses and looked directly at Rachel, her expression stern but not unkind. "Ms. Andrews, I feel compelled to address the nature of your actions beyond the legal ramifications. Family relationships are built on trust, and you have severely violated that trust. Your brother opened his home to you in a time of need, and you responded by exploiting his generosity and undermining his identity for your own social advancement." Rachel stared at the table, refusing to meet the judge's gaze. "It is my sincere hope that you will use this experience as an opportunity for reflection and growth. Genuine relationships, romantic or familial, cannot be built on deception. They require honesty, respect, and mutual support." Judge Sullivan then turned to me. "Mr. Andrews, while you have been vindicated legally today, I recognize that the personal wound of betrayal by a family member is not so easily addressed. I wish you healing as you move forward." With a final rap of her gavel, the case was closed. In the courthouse lobby, Rachel finally approached me, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. "You've humiliated me in public and turned our family against me." "You did that yourself, Rachel," I replied quietly. "All I did was refuse to let you get away with it." "I'll pay your stupid money," she snapped. "But don't expect me to ever forgive you for this." Without waiting for my response, she stormed out of the courthouse, leaving me standing there with the hollow victory of legal vindication but the painful awareness of a family bond shattered beyond repair. The aftermath of the court case was as difficult as I had anticipated. Our extended family was divided, with some understanding my position and others feeling I had been too harsh in taking legal action against my own sister. Our mother, initially sympathetic to Rachel, gradually began to recognize the truth as more details emerged and Rachel's behavior became increasingly erratic and defensive. 2 weeks after the court case, Rachel sent a text message that barely qualified as an apology. "Sorry things got so out of hand. I didn't think it was such a big deal at the time." There was no acknowledgement of the deliberate nature of her actions, the multiple lies, or the manipulation of our family. It was, at best, an acknowledgement that something unfortunate had happened, not that she had been the cause of it. Despite the court order, Rachel's repayments were sporadic and always accompanied by passive-aggressive notes, implying that I was causing her financial hardship by insisting on restitution. Each payment felt less like progress toward resolution and more like another small battle in an ongoing war. The experience had fundamentally changed how I viewed not just Rachel but relationships in general. I found myself more cautious, more guarded with my trust. I installed a sophisticated security system in my apartment, changed all my passwords, and set up alerts for any unusual activity on my accounts. The sanctuary of my home, once taken for granted, now required active protection. I also established clearer boundaries with family members. When my mother suggested that Rachel join us for Thanksgiving dinner, I politely but firmly declined to attend if she would be present. It wasn't about punishment or holding a grudge. It was about protecting my own well-being from someone who had shown no genuine remorse or changed behavior. "She's still your sister," Mom said, her voice pleading. "Being family doesn't give someone the right to abuse your trust," I replied. "When Rachel demonstrates that she's changed, I'll reconsider. Until then, I need to keep my distance." As difficult as these boundaries were to establish, they proved essential for my healing process. I focused on strengthening relationships with friends who had stood by me, like Brandon, who never once questioned my decision to pursue legal action. I reconnected with colleagues who had no connection to the drama of my personal life and found comfort in the straightforward nature of professional relationships. 6 months after the court case, Rachel had repaid about 1/3 of what she owed. The payments, while inconsistent, suggested she was at least making some effort to comply with the court order. I heard through family that she had found a steady job and was dating someone new, hopefully with more honesty this time. As for me, the acute pain of betrayal had gradually dulled to a sadness for what was lost. I had begun working with a therapist to process the experience, and was slowly rebuilding my sense of security and trust. I focused on my career, took on challenging new projects, and even started dating again after initially withdrawing from social connections. The most valuable lesson from this painful chapter wasn't about the dangers of trusting family, or the importance of legal protection. It was about the balance between compassion and self-respect. Loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to take advantage of you. Supporting someone doesn't mean enabling harmful behavior. And sometimes, the most caring thing you can do for both yourself and the other person is to hold them accountable for their actions. I don't know if Rachel and I will ever rebuild any semblance of the relationship we once had. That would require changes I'm not sure she's capable of making. But I do know that by standing up for myself, I prevented a pattern that would have continued and likely worsened over time. Sometimes love means setting firm boundaries and being willing to enforce them, even when it hurts. If there's one thing I hope anyone takes from my story, it's this: your kindness deserves to be met with respect, not exploitation. Your generosity should be appreciated, not taken for granted. And when someone violates your trust, you have not only the right but the responsibility to protect yourself, even if that person shares your blood. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, family should be your greatest support, not your greatest burden.